The atmosphere inside the conference room on the 42nd floor of the Prudential Tower in Boston was suffocating, but only for one person. For Marcus Sterling, the air was crisp, scented with the smell of expensive leather and the even more intoxicating aroma of impending victory. He sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, casually checking his reflection in the dark glass of his smartphone. He adjusted his silk tie, a purchase he had made just yesterday morning at a boutique in Martha's Vineyard. His wife, Sarah, thought he had spent the weekend at a leadership conference in Washington, D.C., suffering through endless seminars on corporate synergy. In reality, Marcus had spent the last 48 hours in the arms of a 23-year-old fitness instructor named Chloe, drinking vintage champagne on a rented yacht and ignoring every single call from home. He felt invincible. He felt refreshed. He felt like a man who had finally decided to trim the fat from his life. And unfortunately for Sarah, she was the excess weight. Across from him sat his attorney, Brad Holloway, a man known in Boston legal circles as the Butcher. Holloway was currently laughing at something Marcus had just whispered, a cruel joke about Sarah's fashion sense. Holloway tapped his pen against a thick stack of documents. These were the settlement papers. They were brutal, unfair, and completely ironclad. Marcus had moved all the liquid assets into offshore accounts in the Caymans 3 months ago. He had transferred the deed to the summer house into a Shell LLC registered in Delaware. On paper, Marcus Sterling was broke. On paper, he was a struggling businessman who could barely afford alimony. In reality, he was ready to start a new life with Chloe, sitting on a pile of hidden cash that Sarah would never find. Marcus checked his watch. It was a Patek Philippe. Another gift to himself that Sarah didn't know about. "She's late," Marcus said, his voice booming slightly in the acoustically perfect room. "Probably couldn't get her old station wagon to start." He laughed, and Holloway joined in, a dry, practiced chuckle. Marcus leaned back, putting his hands behind his head. The arrogance radiated off him in waves. He had no idea who he was dealing with, or what was walking through that door. He only knew the version of Sarah he had manipulated for a decade. The quiet, supportive wife who volunteered at the library and never asked questions about the credit card bills. He thought she was a mouse entering a lion's den. The heavy double doors opened. The room went silent, but not out of respect. It was the silence of predators watching prey enter the clearing. Sarah walked in. She looked tired. She was wearing a gray cardigan that was 2 sizes too big and scuffed flats. She carried no briefcase, only a battered canvas tote bag that looked like it contained knitting supplies rather than legal defense. Following her was a man who looked like he had just woken up on a park bench. He wore a rumpled suit that was shiny at the elbows, and he was clutching a frantic mess of loose papers against his chest. This was her lawyer. Marcus had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing out loud. It was pathetic. It was exactly what he had expected. Sarah took the seat opposite Marcus. She didn't look him in the eye. She kept her gaze focused on the table, her hands folded in her lap. The court reporter in the corner began typing. Holloway cleared his throat, sensing the kill. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. He slid the heavy stack of documents across the polished wood. It made a harsh, sliding sound that echoed in the room. "Mrs. Sterling," Holloway began, his tone dripping with condescension. "We are here to expedite this process. Marcus has been incredibly generous, considering the circumstances of the business's recent downturn. We are offering you the condo in Worcester and a lump sum of $50,000. In exchange, you waive all rights to Sterling Dynamics, the primary residence in Beacon Hill, and any future earnings." Marcus leaned forward, a predatory grin on his face. He wanted to twist the knife. He wanted her to know that he had won, and he wanted to see her break. "Just sign it, Sarah," Marcus said, his voice smooth and fake. "I know this is hard for you to understand. Business is complicated. You were never good with numbers. The company is practically bankrupt anyway. I'm doing you a favor. Take the money, go back to your parents in Ohio and start over. It's more than you deserve." Sarah remained silent. She reached into her canvas bag. Marcus expected her to pull out a tissue. He expected tears. He expected her to beg him to come home, to ask him why he was doing this. He was ready for the emotional outburst. He had actually rehearsed his cold, dismissive response in the mirror that morning. But she didn't pull out a tissue. She pulled out a bottle of water, unscrewed the cap, and took a slow, deliberate sip. Her hands were not shaking. Her lawyer, the man in the rumpled suit, dropped his pile of papers onto the table. It was a chaotic mess. He looked confused, looking around the room as if he wasn't sure he was in the right building. "Mr. Sterling," the disheveled lawyer mumbled, squinting at Marcus. "My client, Sarah. She has some concerns about the schedule." Marcus rolled his eyes. "The schedule? Are you kidding me? I just offered her a clean break and 50 grand. There is no schedule. There is sign or get nothing." He looked at Sarah, his patience evaporating. He wanted to get this over with so he could text Chloe. The memory of the weekend flashed in his mind. The lobster dinner, the late-night swim, the way he had ignored Sarah's text asking if he was okay. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He was the alpha here. "Sarah, look at me," Marcus commanded, slamming his hand on the table. The noise made the court reporter jump. "Stop wasting my expensive time. You have no leverage. You have no money. You have a lawyer who looks like he pays for his office with coupons. I am trying to be nice here. But if you push me, I will withdraw the offer. I will leave you with nothing. Not a dime. Do you understand?" Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes were different. The warmth he was used to was gone. In its place was a flat, dull void. It wasn't sadness. It was the look of someone watching a car crash from a safe distance. She didn't speak to him. She turned to her lawyer and nodded once, a microscopic movement. The rumpled lawyer stopped fumbling. He stopped squinting. He sat up straighter, and suddenly, the confusion on his face vanished, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. He reached into his own jacket pocket and pulled out a single, thin envelope. He didn't slide it across the table. He placed it gently in the center, equidistant between Marcus and Halloway. "We aren't here to discuss the settlement you drafted, Mr. Halloway," the lawyer said, his voice suddenly deep, resonant, and completely devoid of the stutter he had feigned moments ago. "We are here to discuss the weekend Marcus just spent in Martha's Vineyard, and we are here to discuss the audit of Sterling Dynamics that began at 8 a.m. this morning." Marcus froze. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at the envelope, then at Sarah. She was still perfectly still, but the corner of her mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was a signal. For the first time all morning, the silence in the room wasn't predatory. It was the silence of a trap that had just snapped shut, and Marcus, in his arrogance, hadn't even felt the steel jaws closing around his leg yet. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the glass walls. He shook his head at Halloway, playing to an audience that wasn't there. "An audit? Is that your big play, Sarah? You think hiring a forensic accountant with money you don't have is going to scare me?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I have the best tax attorneys in Boston. My books are cleaner than a church hymnal. And as for Martha's Vineyard, you are delusional. I was in D.C. saving our lifestyle, while you sat at home watching soap operas." He lied with the ease of a sociopath, completely unbothered by gaslighting the woman who had supported him for 10 years. He reached for a folder Halloway had kept in reserve, flipping it open aggressively. "Since you want to play dirty, let's talk about your spending, Sarah. I have statements here showing reckless spending." It was absurd. She bought food and medicine, but he twisted it into financial irresponsibility. "I can prove you were draining the marital assets while I was trying to build a future. If we go to trial, I will paint you as a leech. I will make sure the judge sees you as a gold digger who contributed nothing to Sterling Dynamics. You will be lucky to walk away with the clothes on your back," Halloway chimed in, smoothing his silk tie. "Mr. Sterling is correct. The Massachusetts courts do not look kindly on spouses who squander assets. We have affidavits from the CFO stating your interference caused losses. It was a complete fabrication. Sarah had never stepped foot in the corporate offices. We can drag this out for years, Mrs. Sterling. We will bleed you dry in legal fees before you ever see a courtroom. This offer is a lifeline. Take it, sign the papers, and disappear before we ruin your reputation." Sarah sat perfectly still, listening to the barrage of lies without flinching. A few years ago, this aggression would have broken her spirit. She would have been crying, apologizing for things she hadn't done. But that woman died on Friday night when she saw the credit card notification on the shared iPad. It was a charge for a private charter to the vineyard, followed by a transaction at a jewelry store. She didn't feel sadness anymore. She felt a cold, hard clarity. She looked at Marcus and saw a stranger in a suit. She wasn't vulnerable. She was waiting. Suddenly, a soft vibration buzzed against the mahogany table. It came from Sarah's phone. It was a short, rhythmic pulse, followed by a second one exactly 3 seconds later. Marcus ignored it, too busy gloating, but Sarah's eyes flickered to the device. It wasn't a text message. It was a signal, a specific alert she had set up with a private investigator. The vibration meant one thing. The digital trap had been sprung. The wire transfer Marcus thought was secure had just been flagged, not by the bank, but by federal authorities. Marcus noticed her glance at the phone and scoffed. "Who is texting you? Your mother. Tell her to get the guest room ready." He checked his watch again. "I have a flight to catch in 2 hours, business in Miami." It was actually a trip with Chloe, but he didn't care. "Last chance. Pick up the pen, sign the line, and get out of my life." The rumpled lawyer next to Sarah finally moved. He picked up his own phone, looked at the screen, and then at Holloway. "I wouldn't worry about that flight, Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice dropping the trembling facade. "The offer is rejected." Before Marcus could process the sudden shift in tone, the heavy double doors of the conference room swung open with enough force to bang against the stops. Marcus jumped to his feet, furious at the interruption. "What is this? I gave orders not to be disturbed." But the people entering were not office interns. First came 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, scanning the room with professional indifference. Then a woman walked in. She was sharp, terrifyingly elegant, and carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than Holloway's car. Behind her marched 4 junior associates in lockstep, creating a wall of expensive wool suits that filled the room. Holloway turned pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He recognized her immediately. It was Eleanor Vance, the managing partner of Vance & Moore, one of the most feared corporate litigation firms in New York. "You can pack up your settlement papers, Brad," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the room like ice. She didn't look at Marcus. She walked straight to Sarah and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Apologies for the delay, Mrs. Sterling. The jet had a minor hold pattern at Logan. We are ready to proceed with the hostile dissolution." Marcus looked at Sarah, confusion finally giving way to a creeping, cold dread. Marcus stared at the newcomers, his mind racing to make sense of the visual data. "Who is paying for this?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Sarah has no money. I cut off her credit cards this morning. She can't afford a parking ticket, let alone Vance & Moore." Eleanor Vance didn't even sit down. She remained standing, opening her briefcase and removing a single blue folder. "That is a common misconception, Mr. Sterling," Eleanor said smoothly. "You assumed Sarah was dependent on your salary because she chose to live modestly. You failed to realize that her grandmother was not just a librarian in Ohio, but the silent founder of the Blackwood Trust." Sarah looked up, her expression calm. "I never touched the trust, Marcus. I wanted us to build something together. But you didn't want a partner. You wanted a fan." Holloway grabbed the blue folder, his hands shaking noticeably. He scanned the first page, and the color drained from his face completely, leaving him looking sickly under the fluorescent lights. This is a lien," Holloway whispered, looking up at Marcus with horror. "On everything." Eleanor nodded. "Precisely. When Marcus needed that initial capital injection 5 years ago to expand Sterling Dynamics, he signed a secured loan agreement. He thought it was from a generic venture capital firm in Delaware. It was actually a shell company controlled by Sarah's family trust." Marcus felt the room spin. He hadn't built his empire on his own genius. He had built it on a loan from the wife he was currently trying to cheat out of $50,000. "Because you have violated the morality clause of the loan agreement, specifically the section regarding misappropriation of funds for illicit personal travel and entertainment. The loan is now callable immediately," Eleanor stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "The principal is $12 million plus interest." Marcus laughed nervously, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I can pay that. I have assets. I'll just liquidate some holdings." He reached for his phone to call his banker. As he unlocked the screen, notifications began flooding in. Chase Bank. Account frozen. Bank of America. Suspicious activity alert. American Express. Card declined. The offshore accounts in the Caymans were not safe either. The international freezing orders had already hit. Marcus looked at Holloway for help, desperation creeping into his eyes. "Do something, Brad. File an injunction. Stop them." But the butcher was already packing his things into his expensive leather bag. Holloway knew a losing battle when he saw one, and he knew Eleanor Vance destroyed careers for sport. "I can't represent you in a conflict of this magnitude, Marcus," Holloway said, snapping his briefcase shut. "My retainer doesn't cover federal fraud investigations or battles with the Blackwood Trust. You lied to me about your solvency. You're on your own." Holloway stood up and walked out without looking back, leaving Marcus alone on the wrong side of the table. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of his sudden isolation. Panic finally set in, raw and suffocating. Marcus needed to get to his office immediately. He had a safe behind the abstract painting in his executive suite with emergency cash and a hard drive containing the real ledgers. "This is harassment," Marcus spat, grabbing his jacket. "I'm leaving. You'll hear from my new lawyers." He stormed toward the door, expecting Sarah to stop him, to tell him it was all a bad joke. She didn't. She just watched him with that terrifying, pitying gaze. He burst out into the hallway, expecting the usual deferential nods from the staff. Instead, he saw two uniformed security guards standing by the elevator, arms crossed, blocking his path. "Mr. Sterling, please hand over your building badge," the head of building security said. Marcus recognized him. Joe, a man Marcus had never bothered to learn the last name of, despite seeing him every day for 6 years. "Excuse me? I own this floor," Marcus shouted, trying to push past. Joe didn't budge. "Not anymore, sir. The receiver appointed by the district court has locked down the premises. Your access has been revoked pending the DOJ investigation into wire fraud." Employees were gathering in the glass-walled cubicles, whispering and pointing with phones raised. The people Marcus had terrorized for years were now watching his downfall in real time. Marcus retreated to the stairwell, his hands trembling violently as he dialed Chloe. She was his escape plan. She had the tickets to Miami. She answered on the second ring. "Baby, listen, there's been a mix-up," Marcus stammered. "I need you to bring the car to the back entrance." There was a pause, and then a cold voice he didn't recognize. "Who is this?" Chloe asked. "Marcus, I saw the news on Twitter. They're saying you're being indicted for embezzlement. My friends are sending me links." The tone wasn't loving. It was suspicious. "Chloe, don't listen to them. Just bring the Porsche." "The Porsche?" She laughed harshly. "The one you leased in the company name? The tow truck is taking it right now." The call ended with a click. Marcus leaned against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell. He had no lawyer, no access to his building, no money, and his girlfriend had just dumped him. But he still had his pride, and he still had his public image. He wasn't going to let Sarah win this easily. He pulled up Twitter and Instagram on his phone. If he couldn't win in court, he would win in the court of public opinion. He would destroy her character before the truth came out. He began typing a frantic, victimized post, tagging every major news outlet in Boston. He had no idea that Sarah's team was already monitoring his keystrokes in real time. Marcus sat on the steps of the emergency stairwell, his thumbs flying across the screen. He drafted a long thread on X, formerly Twitter, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive, mentally unstable ex-wife who was using her family connections to destroy an honest entrepreneur. He posted photos of Sarah looking disheveled from years ago, claiming she had a substance abuse problem. "The truth will come out," he typed, hitting send on a post that tagged the Boston Globe, TMZ, and CNN. Within seconds, the likes started rolling in. His followers, mostly aspiring alpha businessmen who bought his online courses, began rallying to his defense. He felt a surge of validation. He could still control the narrative. He could still win this. He decided to go live on Instagram. He fixed his hair in the reflection of the fire extinguisher glass, put on his best aggrieved leader face, and hit the live button. "Guys, I can't believe I have to do this," he started, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "I'm being attacked. My company is being stolen. My ex-wife, she's not who you think she is." The viewer count ticked up. 500, 1,000, 5,000. People love a train wreck. He started weaving a story about how Sarah had embezzled the money herself and was framing him. He was convincing. He was charismatic. For a moment, it seemed like the tide might turn. Comments flooded in. "Stay strong, King. Lawyer up. Don't let her take your empire. Back in the conference room, Eleanor Vance watched the live stream on a tablet. Sarah didn't even look at the screen. She was busy signing documents that authorized the forensic audit of the Cayman accounts. "He's digging his own grave," Eleanor noted dryly. "He just publicly accused you of a felony while currently under investigation for that exact crime. This video will be Exhibit A in the defamation suit." Sarah capped her pen. "Let him talk," she said softly. "The more he talks, the less I have to say." She wasn't angry. She was surgical. She knew that Marcus's greatest weakness was his need for attention, and she was letting him overdose on it. Suddenly, the live stream comments changed. A verified account, the official account of Sterling Dynamics, posted a single link in the chat, then another link from the U.S. District Attorney's office. Viewers clicked. The link led to a PDF of the federal indictment, unsealed 5 minutes ago. It wasn't just dry legal text. It included screenshots of Marcus's text messages to Chloe, mocking his investors and detailing exactly how he was skimming money from the employee pension fund. The comments shifted instantly. "Pension fund? You stole from your workers. Dude, this looks bad." Unfollowing. The viewer count didn't drop. It skyrocketed. But now they were there to watch the execution, not support the victim. Marcus saw the comments turn. He started stammering, his smooth facade cracking. That's fake. It's photoshopped." But then, a notification popped up on his screen. His account had been flagged for spreading misinformation. Then, the feed cut to black. Banned. He stared at the blank screen, his chest heaving. He heard footsteps echoing from the bottom of the stairwell. Heavy boots. Radios. This wasn't building security. This was the U.S. Marshals Service. He scrambled up the stairs, bursting through the door onto the roof of the Prudential Tower. The wind whipped his tie around his face. He was trapped. The roof access door slammed open behind him. Marcus spun around, backing toward the edge, the Boston skyline sprawling out behind him. A kingdom he thought he owned, now just scenery for his arrest. It wasn't just the marshals. Leading them was the rumpled lawyer, who now wore a badge on his belt. He was an undercover agent with the SEC working on this case for 6 months. And behind him was Sarah. She had changed out of the oversized cardigan. She was wearing a tailored black coat, looking every inch the powerful heiress she had hidden away. She didn't look malicious. She looked disappointed. "Marcus Sterling!" the agent shouted over the wind. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement." Marcus looked at Sarah, pleading with his eyes. "Sarah, tell them it's a mistake. We can work this out. I still love you." It was a desperate, pathetic lie. The last gasp of a manipulator who had run out of cards. Sarah walked forward until she was just a few feet away. The wind caught her hair, but she didn't shiver. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the cheap wedding band she had worn for a decade. "You don't love me, Marcus," Sarah said, her voice clear and steady against the wind. "You love the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes. But the mirror is broken. She didn't throw the ring off the building. That would be dramatic, and she was done with drama." She handed it to the marshal. "Evidence," she said simply. "He paid for it with the company credit card." Marcus slumped to his knees as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The camera crews from the news helicopters circling above captured the image, the titan of industry, broken and weeping, while his wife turned her back and walked away into the arms of her real legal team. The sentencing hearing took place 6 months later in the John Joseph Moakley United States Courthouse. The room was packed. Former employees of Sterling Dynamics filled the gallery, wearing T-shirts that said, "Justice for the Pension Fund." Reporters jockeyed for position in the back. Marcus sat at the defense table, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his pale, unshaven face. He had aged 10 years. His hair was thinning, and the arrogant glint in his eyes had been replaced by a permanent, twitchy anxiety. He looked small. Holloway was nowhere to be seen. Marcus was now represented by a court-appointed public defender who looked bored and kept checking the clock. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for maximum sentences in white-collar crimes, shuffled the papers on her bench. "Mr. Sterling," she began, peering over her glasses. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case of such breathtaking greed and disregard for the law. You didn't just steal money. You stole livelihoods. You stole the future from families who trusted you. Marcus tried to stand up to speak, but his lawyer yanked him back down. Sit down, the defender hissed. You'll only make it worse. Marcus slumped, realizing that for the first time in his life, his charm was useless. His voice had no power here. Then, the prosecutor called for a victim impact statement. Sarah walked to the podium. The room went silent. She looked radiant. She wasn't wearing designer clothes to show off. She was dressed in a simple, professional suit that signaled competence and grace. She didn't look at Marcus. She addressed the judge. Your Honor, she said, her voice unwavering. For years, I was told I was worthless. I was told I was lucky to be associated with Mr. Sterling. I believed him. She paused, taking a breath. But I learned that worth isn't determined by a bank account or a title. It's determined by integrity. Mr. Sterling has none. The sentence was swift and brutal. Marcus Sterling, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $12 million to the Blackwood Trust and $4 million to the Sterling Dynamics Pension Fund. The gavel fell. The sound echoed with finality. Marcus collapsed onto the table, wailing. The guards hauled him up, not gently. As they dragged him out the side door, he looked back one last time, searching for Sarah. She was already walking out the main aisle, surrounded by the employees she had saved by using the trust money to buy back the company. Outside the courthouse, the air was cold and fresh. The press was waiting, cameras flashing. Microphones were thrust in Sarah's face. Mrs. Sterling, how do you feel? Do you have a comment for Marcus? Sarah stopped. She looked directly into the camera lens, knowing that Marcus would be watching this on the news in the holding cell. I feel free, she said. And as for Marcus, I hope he learns how to do his own laundry. She smiled, a genuine bright smile that lit up the gloomy Boston afternoon. She turned and walked toward her car, where Eleanor Vance was waiting with a celebratory coffee. 3 years later, Sarah stood in the lobby of the newly rebranded Sterling Blackwood Dynamics. The space was bright, filled with plants and natural light. The toxic culture of fear Marcus had instilled was gone, replaced by collaboration and transparency. She wasn't just the owner, she was the CEO. She greeted the receptionist by name, asked about the security guard's kids. She was respected, not feared. Her phone buzzed. It was a letter from prison. Marcus wrote every week, begging for a visit, begging for money for the commissary. She didn't open it. She dropped it into the recycling bin without breaking stride. She walked into the conference room, the same one where she had once been offered $50,000 to disappear. Now, she sat at the head of the table. Her team was waiting. They were launching a new initiative, a scholarship fund for the children of the employees Marcus had tried to rob. She looked out the window at the Boston skyline. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and built a fortress. Okay, everyone, Sarah said, opening her folder. Let's get to work. She was no longer the victim. She was the architect of her own destiny. The story of the cheated wife was over. The story of the Titan had just begun. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They are the ones watching, listening, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they do, they don't just win. They change the game entirely. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic tales of karma and redemption. What do you think? Was 15 years enough for Marcus, or did he deserve a life sentence for ruining so many lives? Let me know in the comments below.